Ambassador Torak of the Galactic Concord watched the human delegation enter the Grand Chamber with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. After centuries of interstellar exploration, humanity had finally been invited to join the assembly of spacefaring civilizations. Unlike most species who approached the Concord with either deference or aggression, humans had simply waited. Ambassador Jack Miller announced the human at the front of the delegation. "We are honored to be welcomed to these proceedings." Torak noted the lack of military decorations on the human's attire. Most species arrived in their war finery, displaying past victories as a statement of strength. These humans wore simple blue suits with small pins bearing the emblem of Earth. "The Concord recognizes Earth," stated High Chancellor Velox. "Your species presents an anomaly in our records. In the century since we began observing your development, you have not engaged in planetary warfare. This is unprecedented." The human delegation exchanged glances. Ambassador Miller cleared his throat. "We have had our conflicts, Chancellor, but we learned to avoid war." "Impossible," rumbled Ambassador Grek of the Thosian Empire. "All species war amongst themselves until a victor emerges. It is the natural order." Miller smiled. "With respect, Ambassador, humanity's history is filled with war. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. The final World War almost ended our civilization entirely." The chamber grew silent. Species that had fought for dominance of their homeworlds for millennia struggled to comprehend. "If you were so warlike," said Torak, "what changed?" "We discovered something more terrifying than our enemies," Miller replied. "Ourselves." He activated a holographic display showing Earth history, ancient battles giving way to modern conflicts with increasingly devastating weapons. "The last global war killed 1 billion people in 3 days, Miller explained. "We realized that our capacity for destruction had outpaced our wisdom to control it. So we made a choice: evolve beyond warfare or face extinction." "You simply decided not to fight?" asked Velox, incredulous. "No," said Miller. "We built something better. Our nations still disagreed, still competed, but we created systems to channel conflict away from destruction. Our United Earth Council manages disputes through economic and diplomatic means." "And this works?" Torak couldn't hide his disbelief. Miller's face grew serious. "It wasn't easy. It required us to acknowledge our darkest impulses and build safeguards against them. We don't claim to be perfect, but we've maintained global peace for 70 years. Grek scoffed. "Then you are weak. War strengthens a species. How have you advanced without it?" "By competing in other ways," Miller replied. "Science, art, exploration. We found that cooperation often achieves more than conflict." The chamber erupted in multiple alien languages, some skeptical, others intrigued. As the translators struggled to keep pace, Torak studied the humans carefully. There was something in their stance, a quiet confidence that didn't demand acknowledgement. "The Concord requires proof," declared Velox finally. "We will send observers to Earth to study this peace system." Miller nodded. "We welcome your delegation, Chancellor. Perhaps understanding why humanity avoids war will benefit us all." As the session adjourned, Torak approached Miller privately. "Your people baffle us, Ambassador. Most species join the Concord seeking protection or advantage. What does Earth want?" Miller smiled. "To learn, Ambassador Torak. And perhaps, if we're worthy, to teach." The observation team arrived on Earth 3 standard months later. Led by Torak himself, the delegation included representatives from 12 conquered species, each bringing their own biases and expectations. "This is New Geneva," explained Dr. Emma Reed, their human guide. "Home of the United Earth Council and symbolic center of our governance system." Torak gazed at the sprawling complex. Unlike the fortified government, centers of other worlds, this one was open, with minimal security and civilians freely walking its grounds. "Where are your defenses?" asked Call, the Moravian tactical specialist. "Your weapon emplacements?" Emma smiled. "We don't need them here. This is neutral territory by universal agreement." "Universal agreement means nothing without enforcement," Call insisted. "Perhaps on your world," Emma replied. "Here, the agreement itself is the enforcement." Torak watched the exchange with interest. He had studied human history during the journey to Earth and found it difficult to reconcile the peaceful civilization before him with the brutal past they freely acknowledged. "Dr. Reed," he said, "your species fought 3 global wars in the span of 2 centuries. The last nearly exterminated you. How did such a fundamental change occur in merely 70 years? Emma led them to a memorial garden where a black obelisk rose from a reflecting pool. Etched upon it were countless names, in dozens of languages. "This monument lists every child killed in our final war," she said quietly. "After the ceasefire, it was built simultaneously in every major city on Earth. A constant reminder." "A reminder of weakness," muttered Call. "No," Emma replied firmly. "A reminder of cost. We didn't suddenly become peaceful beings, Ambassador Torak. We simply realized that war had become too expensive." "Expensive?" Torak was puzzled. "All war has costs." "Not just in lives and resources," she explained. "In possibility. Each conflict narrowed our future options until we faced a binary choice: evolve or perish." The delegation continued through a massive library where researchers from diverse backgrounds worked side by side. "This is our Conflict Transformation Institute," Emma explained. "When disputes arise between nations or factions, they're brought here for resolution." "And if resolution fails?" asked Ziv, the Palladian economist. "It doesn't," Emma said simply. "Because failure isn't an option. We present." "That's absurd," Call interjected. "Conflict is inevitable." "Yes," agreed Emma. "Conflict is natural. Violence is a choice." She led them to an observation deck overlooking a chamber where representatives from 2 nations were engaged in heated discussion. "Those are delegates from regions that once launched nuclear weapons at each other," she explained. "Now they argue over fishing rights." "They appear quite angry," noted Torak. "Of course they are," Emma smiled. "We don't suppress emotion or disagreement. We channel it. The system doesn't eliminate conflict. It transforms it into something productive." As they watched, the delegates reached for a holographic interface between them, manipulating data and projections. "They're using simulation modeling," Emma explained, "seeing the long-term consequences of various solutions." "Fascinating," said Ziv. "You've gamified diplomacy." "In a way," Emma admitted. "Humans respond well to structure and incentives. We built systems that reward cooperation while allowing for healthy competition." As they departed, Torak noticed Cal's skeptical expression. "You disapprove, tactical specialist?" "They've grown soft," Cal replied. "The universe isn't safe. Eventually they'll face an enemy they cannot talk into submission." Torak considered this. "Perhaps they've developed strengths we don't recognize yet." Emma overheard and smiled mysteriously. "Tomorrow, we'll show you how we defend ourselves, Ambassador. I think you might be surprised." The military installation outside Old Denver bore little resemblance to the war complexes found throughout the galaxy. Instead of weapon silos and barracks, the facility featured training grounds, research centers, and what the humans called diplomatic response units. Admiral Tom Wilson, Earth Defense Force commander, greeted the delegation with a firm handshake. Unlike Emma's casual attire, he wore a crisp uniform adorned with minimal insignia. "Welcome to the Combined Defense Academy," he said. "This is where we train those who stand at the intersection of peace and protection." "These are your warriors?" asked Cal, observing a group of humans engaged in what appeared to be a discussion rather than combat training. "We don't use that term," Wilson replied. "They're guardians, negotiators, and last resort defenders." "A military that doesn't fight," scoffed Cal. "How do you deter aggression?" Wilson's expression remained neutral. "By making aggression unprofitable. Follow me." He led them to a simulation chamber where operators coordinated a complex response to a fictional crisis, a resource dispute between colonies on Mars and Europa. "Our first layer of defense is prevention," Wilson explained. 80% of our resources go toward predicting and resolving conflicts before they escalate." "And when prevention fails?" asked Torak. "Then we have options." Wilson activated a holographic display showing Earth's orbital defenses, an integrated network of platforms and satellites. "We maintain defensive capabilities that make attacking Earth extraordinarily costly." "I see no fleet," observed Call. No attack ships. We have those too, Wilson acknowledged. But they're not our primary deterrent. This is. The display shifted to show a vast communications array. The Harmony Network connects Earth with every human settlement in the solar system and beyond. Any aggression against human interests triggers an immediate and unified response. Economics? Sanctions? Asked Ziv. Among other things, Wilson nodded. We've made ourselves essential to galactic commerce and knowledge exchange. Attacking us would collapse supply chains across 3 sectors. Torak was beginning to understand. You've weaponized interdependence. We prefer to think of it as incentivized cooperation, Wilson corrected. But yes, essentially. As they toured the facility, they observed training exercises that combined traditional defense tactics with diplomatic scenarios and economic strategic responses. What about your ships? Call pressed. Your weapons technology? Wilson hesitated before responding. We maintain adequate defensive capabilities. You're being evasive, Admiral, Call pushed. Wilson sighed. Very well. Computer, authorization Wilson Alpha 7, display Project Aegis. The holographic display transformed to show spacecraft unlike any in the Concord's records, sleek vessels with technology that even Torak couldn't identify. We haven't abandoned self-defense, Wilson explained. We've just made it our last resort rather than our first instinct. These ships have never fired. They're weapons outside of testing. We hope they never will. Impressive, admitted Call reluctantly, but untested in real combat. True, Wilson nodded. Though not for lack of opportunity. We've faced 13 potential conflicts with non-Earth factions in the past decade. All were resolved without violence. Fortune favors you, said Call. Eventually, you'll meet an enemy that cannot be reasoned with. Wilson's expression darkened slightly. We're not naive, Specialist Call. We remember our history. If forced to fight, humanity will do so with the same intensity we once turned against ourselves. The difference is that now we understand the cost before we begin. As they left the facility, Torak noticed a memorial similar to the one in New Geneva, the black obelisk with children's names. You place these everywhere? He asked Emma. Yes, she replied softly. Even in our defense installations, especially there. As a reminder of weakness, Call muttered again. Admiral Wilson overheard. No, Specialist. As a reminder of what happens when we fail. Humanity doesn't avoid war because we're afraid to fight. We avoid it because we know exactly what we're capable of when we do. The Concord delegation's 4th week on Earth coincided with the annual Remembrance Day, a solemn global ceremony commemorating the end of humanity's final World War. Torak and his team were invited to observe the proceedings in what was once called North America. It's not a celebration, Emma explained as they stood among thousands of silent humans in a vast memorial park. It's a reckoning. The ceremony began with the reading of names, 500 selected randomly from the billions who had perished. Each name was accompanied by a simple biographical note. A child who loved painting. A doctor who treated the wounded. A poet whose works were lost forever. Many in the gathered crowd wept openly. Others stood with expressions of grim determination. There was no glorification of battle, no triumphant monuments to victory, only acknowledging loss. I don't understand, Call whispered to Torak. They mourn, yet they fought for their beliefs. There is honor in that sacrifice. I believe that's precisely what they're rejecting, Torak replied softly. The notion that such sacrifice was necessary or honorable. As the ceremony continued, representatives from nations that had once been bitter enemies jointly lit a perpetual flame. Above them, household lights across the planet dimmed for 1 hour. A voluntary gesture visible even from orbit. The darkness represents what we nearly became, Emma told them. The flame is what we chose instead. After the ceremony, the delegation was invited to a council session where global leaders addressed collective challenges, resource allocation, environmental management, and the integration of new technologies. Torak was struck by the deliberate inefficiency of human governance. Decisions that could be made instantly by a single authority instead developed through careful consensus building. When disagreements arose, they were examined thoroughly rather than silenced. Your system seems unnecessarily complex, he observed. To James, a council representative who had joined them. It is. James acknowledged with a small smile. Deliberately so. Efficiency in governance often comes at the cost of consideration. When decisions affect billions, we prefer to move carefully. But in crisis, pressed Cal. When immediate action is required, we have protocols for emergency response, James explained. But even those include distributed authority and mandatory review. No single person or faction can commit humanity to an irreversible course. You don't trust yourselves, Ziv observed. We understand ourselves, James corrected. Human history is filled with charismatic leaders who channeled collective fear into destructive action. Our system is designed to prevent that pattern from recurring. Later, as they observed a public debate about expanding settlements on Mars, Torak noted the peculiar way humans disagreed. Forcefully, but without threatening violence or dominance. Your species seems paradoxical, he told Emma. You acknowledge your capacity for violence, yet have built systems that assume cooperation is possible. Emma nodded. That's precisely it, Ambassador. We don't pretend to be naturally peaceful. We know better. Our systems aren't built on naive hope. They're built on hard-earned wisdom about our own nature. And if the systems fail, asked Torak. They have, she admitted. Locally, periodically. When they do, we repair and strengthen them. That's why our peace has held, not because it's perfect, but because we expect and plan for its imperfections. As they departed the council chambers, a small group of protesters had gathered outside, advocating for policy changes regarding extraterrestrial relations. Dissent, noted Call. Perhaps your unity is not as complete as you claim. We don't claim unity of thought, Emma replied. Only unity of purpose. Those protesters are part of our system, not a threat to it. Torak watched as council members stopped to speak with the protesters, listening to their concerns without dismissal or aggression. Curious, he said. On most worlds, such public challenge to authority would be discouraged. We tried that approach, Emma said quietly. It doesn't end well. Suppressed voices don't disappear. They amplify in the darkness until they explode. Your species continues to confound expectation, Torak admitted. You build your peace on acknowledging your capacity for war, rather than denying it. Yes, Emma nodded. Peace isn't our natural state, it's our chosen state, and choice requires constant renewal. The delegation's investigation took an unexpected turn when a resource dispute erupted between an Earth mining consortium and independent operators in the asteroid belt. Torak received permission to observe the human conflict resolution process firsthand. This is a significant escalation, Emma explained as they boarded a transport to the orbital mediation station. Both parties have rejected initial settlement proposals. Will your Earth Council impose a solution? Asked Torak. No, Emma replied. We don't force outcomes. We facilitate processes. The mediation station orbited at the Lagrange point between Earth and the Moon, neutral territory by both geography and tradition. Representatives from both factions had already arrived, their frustration evident in tense postures and clipped responses. Mediator Ray Dixon welcomed the delegates with the same courtesy he extended to the disputing parties. You're here to observe only, he told Torak's group. Please refrain from engaging in the process. The proceedings began not with statements of demands, but with a shared data modeling session. Both factions contributed their economic projections, resource surveys, and impact assessments to a central simulation. They share information willingly? Ziv asked Emma quietly. Even while in dispute? The process requires it, she whispered back. Deliberately withholding relevant data invalidates one's position. As the day progressed, Torak watched with fascination as the human mediators employed techniques that acknowledged emotional responses, while continuously redirecting toward factual analysis. When tensions rose, they called for breaks rather than pushing through conflict. This seems inefficient, Call observed during one such recess. On Morovia, such disputes would be settled by strength demonstration or executive decree. And how often do those settlements last? Emma asked. Call considered. Until challenged by greater strength. Exactly, Emma nodded. Quick solutions often create long-term problems. We prefer the opposite. By the third day, a pattern emerged that Torak found remarkable. Rather than compromise by both sides sacrificing equally, the mediators guided the parties toward identifying mutual interests and expanding possibilities. They're not dividing the same pie, he realized aloud. They're baking a larger one. Emma smiled. Precisely. Most conflicts occur within assumed constraints. Remove those assumptions and new solutions become possible. On the fourth day, the disputing parties reached an agreement that included joint operations, shared infrastructure development, and coordinated rather than competitive extraction schedules. They're cooperating, Call said with surprise. After such animosity. Animosity doesn't preclude cooperation when interests align, Ray explained, joining their conversation. Humans are remarkably practical when shown a path that benefits their objectives. But what enforces compliance? Asked Call. What prevents violation once advantage is gained? Several mechanisms, Ray replied. Legal enforcement, certainly, but more effectively, reputation capital and future access. Breaking agreement damages one's position in all subsequent negotiations across the system. Later, as they returned to Earth, Torak reviewed his observations. Your system presumes rational actors, he told Emma. What about those who are not rational, who might choose destruction over compromise? They exist, Emma acknowledged. In those cases, we employ containment and consequent strategies. Isolation from the benefits of cooperation becomes a powerful motivator. And if that fails, pressed Torak. Emma's expression grew serious. Then we remember what we once were. Humanity's capacity for violence remains. We've chosen not to use it, not forgotten how. The conquered delegation's time on Earth was drawing to a close when they received an unexpected opportunity. An invitation to join a deep space expedition aboard the research vessel Horizon. The mission, investigating an anomaly at the edge of explored space. This will provide insight into how humans operate beyond the structures of Earth, Captain Mark Lee explained as he welcomed them aboard. Out here we're more improvisational. The Horizon was unlike military vessels Torak had seen throughout the galaxy. While clearly capable of defending itself, its primary systems were dedicated to research and exploration. The crew was diverse, scientists, engineers, and what humans called diplomatic specialists. No dedicated combat personnel? Call asked. During their tour, all crew are trained in defense protocols, Captain Lee replied. But no, we don't maintain a separate military contingent. Our mission is exploration, not conquest. 3 days into their journey, as the ship approached the anomaly, sensors detected an unidentified vessel hiding within the gravitational distortion. It was not broadcasting identification and did not respond to hails. Torak watched with interest as the Horizon's crew responded to the potential threat. There was no immediate battle preparation, no weapons activation. Instead, a coordinated information-gathering operation began. Fascinating, he commented to Emma, who had joined the expedition. As their liaison, they prioritize understanding over security. Understanding is security, she replied. Fear-based responses often create the very threats they're meant to prevent. The mystery deepened when the unknown ship began emitting radiation patterns that interfered with the Horizon's communications. Traditional military doctrine would classify this as an aggressive act. Are they under attack? Asked Call, clearly expecting immediate retaliation. Unknown, Captain Lee replied calmly. Could be a weapon, could be a distress signal, could be their normal operating state. We'll maintain distance and continue observation. Over. The next 12 hours, the Horizon deployed sensor drones and attempted various communication methods while maintaining a defensible position. The crew worked with focused precision, but Torak noted the absence of the fear and aggression he'd observed in similar situations with other species. Your people seem unconcerned, he mentioned to Chief Science Officer Alan Park. Oh, we're concerned, Park corrected. But panic doesn't improve outcomes. We've trained for uncertainty. Eventually, the unknown vessel adjusted its emissions, and a rudimentary communication channel opened. The aliens, a previously uncontacted species called the Novel, had mistaken the Horizon for another ship that had attacked their outpost months earlier. A classic scenario for conflict escalation, Captain Lee explained to the delegation after initial contact was established. Both sides interpreting the other's actions through a lens of assumed hostility. Yet you didn't prepare to attack, said Call. We prepared for everything, corrected Lee, including the possibility that they weren't hostile at all. The encounter evolved into a tense but productive first contact. The novel, learning that humans were not their attackers, shared information about the actual aggressor, a previously unknown predatory species operating in the sector. This is valuable intelligence, Torak acknowledged. Had you responded with aggression, we would never have gained an ally, finished Captain Lee, or learned of a genuine threat. As the Horizon prepared to return to Earth with the novel representatives, Torak found himself reflecting on how differently this encounter might have proceeded with other Concord species. Your approach carries risk, he told Emma. Waiting to understand before acting could provide an aggressive species advantage. True, she acknowledged. We accept that risk as preferable to the alternative, attacking what we don't understand and creating enemies unnecessarily. A philosophy that presumes a forgiving universe, noted Kal. No, Emma replied firmly. A philosophy that recognizes we cannot afford unnecessary conflicts. Humanity has limited resources. We allocate them to actual threats, not perceived ones. And when you face a genuine enemy, pressed Kal, one that cannot be reasoned with? Captain, Lee overheard the question as he joined them on the observation deck. Then we respond accordingly, he said quietly. But we've learned that such enemies are rarer than fear would have us believe. Upon returning to Earth, the delegation found the Concord Council had convened an extraordinary session via quantum link. The discovery of the new predatory species, now identified as the Vex, had triggered security protocols across multiple sectors. The humans encountered a Vex proxy and emerged not only unscathed, but with valuable intelligence, Torak reported to the assembled representatives. Their approach to the unknown merits consideration. High Chancellor Velox appeared skeptical. A fortunate outcome in a single encounter doesn't validate their methods. The question remains, can a species that rejects warfare survive in a universe that does not? The debate continued for hours as various Concord members argued for traditional military responses to the Vex threat. Throughout, the human delegation remained mostly silent, observing rather than advocating. Finally, Ambassador Miller requested permission to address the Council. The Concord stands at a familiar crossroads, he began. One humanity has faced many times. Fear presents a simple path. Prepare for war. Strike preemptively. Secure advantage through force. We understand this impulse better than you might think. He activated a display showing humanity's most devastating conflicts, the weapons they had created, the civilizations they had raised, including their own. We were masters of war, Miller continued. We perfected the art of destruction over thousands of years, and we discovered its fundamental limitation. It cannot build the future we want to inhabit. Admirable sentiments, rumbled Grek. But sentiment doesn't stop aggressors. No, agreed Miller. Actions do. I offer not just philosophy but practical alliance. Earth will share our conflict transformation protocols, our resource distribution, algorithms, and our defensive technologies with any Concord member who wishes to implement them. The chamber erupted in astonished debate. Sharing such systems was unprecedented. And what do humans want in return? Demanded Velox when order was restored. Implementation, Miller replied simply. Not just acceptance of our tools, but commitment to their purpose. We believe the Vex threat can be contained without galactic conflict, but only through coordinated effort. Torak watched the Council's reaction with newfound understanding. The humans weren't advocating pacifism. They were proposing something more radical, systematic peacebuilding as strategic defense. My observations on Earth have led me to an unexpected conclusion, Torak addressed the Council. Humans don't avoid war because they fear it. They avoid it because they've mastered it and moved beyond it. In the days that followed, a coalition formed around the human proposal. Not all Concord members joined. Several martial species refused what they viewed as capitulation, but enough agreed to begin implementation. Torak found Ambassador Miller in the observation lounge as preparations began for a coordinated response to the Vex incursion. Your species has transformed the Concord in mere months, Torak noted. Some believe you planned this outcome from the beginning. Miller smiled. We hoped for cooperation but planned for resistance. Humans have learned to prepare for multiple futures simultaneously. The Vex may not respond to your methods, Torak cautioned. Some entities truly cannot be reasoned with. We're aware, Miller replied, his expression solemn. If diplomacy fails, if economic measures prove ineffective, if isolation is breached, humanity remembers how to fight. But war will be our last resort, not our first instinct. A final question, Ambassador, said Torak. In your history, I found references to a concept called just war, the notion that violence can be morally justified under certain conditions. Does humanity still believe this? Miller considered, carefully before answering. We believe in necessary action, sometimes that includes force, but we've learned to be extremely skeptical of our own justifications. The easier the moral calculation seems, the more carefully we examine it. As they stood watching stars emerge in Earth's darkening sky, Torak finally understood why humanity had so confounded the Concord. They hadn't abandoned their capacity for violence, they had contextualized it within a larger framework of possibility. Your gift to the Concord isn't peace, Torak realized aloud. It's perspective. Miller nodded. Humanity doesn't avoid war because we've become something other than human. We avoid it precisely because we understand what we are. Creatures capable of both tremendous destruction and remarkable creation. We simply chose which capability to cultivate. As night fell completely over the Pacific, Torak gazed upward, at the stars, no longer seeing them as territories to be contested, but as possibilities to be explored. It was, he had to admit, a more expansive view of the universe than warfare had ever allowed. Understanding why humanity avoids war, he murmured, may be the beginning of understanding why the rest of us need not wage it. Miller smiled. That's what we've been hoping someone would say.